Hello everyone. Welcome to our presentation/video. My name is Nina, and in this video you're going to hear from Nude and from a different Nina. We would like to present you our presentation that we created. We covered the chapters 9 and 10 from the book called Sex, Murder, and the Meaning of Life by Douglas T. Kendrick. As first, you're going to hear from Nina. She's going to talk about conspicuous consumption, creativity, and reproductive gain. Then Nude will continue with religion and reproductive gain, and myself will propose possible questions and limitations for the author.
What is conspicuous consumption? Conspicuous consumption is spending large quantities of valuable resources, including but not limited to money, with the goal of flaunting your wealth. Anthropologists have located numerous examples all over the globe, from the tribes of New Guinea to the businessmen of California. In almost all observed cases, throwing away your possessions, whether by presenting exaggerated gifts to a rival tribesman or by purchasing the newest Maserati, can create an impression of power. This signals several things to other people: dominance, fearlessness, and most importantly, the confidence that you can redouble your wealth in such a short amount that it's not even worth counting it. How does prodigality relate to sexual selection? Well, Darwin's theory of sexual selection tells us how certain characteristics are passed on because they enhance an animal's reproductive fitness directly by making it more attractive to the opposite sex, or indirectly by giving it an advantage in competing with members of the same sex. Because human females have a higher investment in the reproductive process, they being the ones that must carry the offspring, then they tend to select their partners more carefully. Douglas Kendrick and his colleagues postulate that traits such as dominance, determination, high social status, all of these strongly suggestible by material possessions, increase a man's attractiveness. In this context, the more chance a man has of drawing attention to himself, the better his reproductive fitness is. Essentially, he pays to get noticed. Kendrick, Sadala, and Verscher created an experiment in which participants had to rate someone's personality and attractiveness after watching a video of their behavior. When they were more dominant, physical posture, sitting at the head of the desk wearing a suit, men were rated as more attractive and desirable. In another study, participants were asked to imagine that they just received an imaginary sum of $5,000. One group was asked to look at photos of buildings, while the other was asked to describe their ideal date with someone highly attractive. After this description, the males were put in a more romantic frame of mind, tended to spend their imaginary money on conspicuous purchases, while the ones in the control group tended to purchase more necessary items. Interestingly, the women's frame of mind, whether they were presented with attractive images or just photos of buildings, had no effect on their subsequent spending. What is the Muse effect? The next chapter deals with the anecdotal fact that every new period in Picasso's artistic development was accompanied by a new mistress. Kendrick postulates that creativity can increase your reproductive chances in its own way, that the more inventive you are, the more attention you draw to yourself, especially if your creations have great public utility or great aesthetic value. In a laboratory study, Kendrick, Cialdini, and Grisvecius asked college students to write a short story about an ambiguous image. Before starting, one group was presented with images of attractive opposite-sex members, while the other group, you guessed right, was shown pictures of buildings. The results differed not in quantity but in quality. Students from the mating framework did not necessarily write more, but their ideas were much more regional, imaginative, and downright extravagant than those from the other control group.
Sex and religion. Does religious participation serve some people's reproductive strategies? According to data gathered from 2006, 40% attend services several times a month, but 42% of Americans hardly ever attend religious services. This book postulates that the religious right and liberal left don't like each other, not due to disagreement over deep philosophical ideals, rather than because both groups are following a different mating strategy and they are getting into each other's way. A primary function of religious groups is to bolster a monogamous reproductive strategy characterized by low promiscuity, exclusive heterosexuality, and high value on marriage and fertility. Treating premarital sex as sinful provides an incentive to marry early, and treating abortion and birth control as sinful encourages people to have children, which they have to take care of, and therefore are more likely to go to work than to university. Religious groups bolster their reproductive strategy in two ways. On the negative side, they enforce a set of strict moral norms, like treating sexual promiscuity as sinful. On the positive side, they provide various forms of support for families that live according to those rules. On the other hand, the liberal left doesn't wait to marry until they finish university or even later. They also don't like to have restricted access to tools of family planning like contraception or abortion. They also don't necessarily have a heteronormative view, which basically means liberal left people don't really care what you do in your bedroom with whom. A study in which students were asked questions about their family plans, their sexual attitudes, their religious attendance, and their moral feelings about stealing, lying, and so on, found out that, first of all, conservative attitudes about sex and reproduction are at the hearts of people participation in traditional religious groups. And second of all, attitudes about sex and family are causes of religious attendance and not just the effects of religious training. The traditional view was that religious teaching caused people to hold conservative attitudes about sex. These findings suggest a very different causal path, that conservative attitudes may cause people to become involved in religion. If this view is correct, people may decide to increase or decrease their level of religious participation as a function of whether that participation advances or hinders their current sexual and reproductive strategies. In a different study, students were told they had to evaluate 6 given profiles of people from a dating app on campus. Those highly attractive people were either of the same sex or of the opposite sex. Afterwards, the participants had to fill out a form with several questions about their own attitudes on several topics. Buried in the list were questions about the extent to which they believed in God and about whether they thought people would be better off if religion played a bigger role in their lives. The results showed that seeing attractive people of the opposite sex had no effect on either men or women. Instead, the studies discovered that looking at attractive people of one's own sex led both men and women to express more belief in God. That's because when one becomes aware that there are a lot of highly attractive mating competitors out there, it reduces the perceived benefits of playing a fast-loose mating strategy and rather go with a more conservative and longer-lasting strategy.
Then we came up with 2 questions, one for chapter 9 and for chapter 10. From chapter 9, we would like to ask the author, why is there no clearly delineated difference between social and sexual power? In our opinion, the power of New Guinea chief, who slaughters all his pigs in a public spectacle, is in a context-specific act. It would make no sense outside the borders of its cultural, economic, and geological sphere. The power of a female putting on a pair of high heels, which by the way can cost as much as the best Ferrari available and serve approximately the same reproductive purpose, is just as tied to its context. It only would make sense in a society in which heels have become a feminine accessory, in which females themselves are taught how to perform femininity, and in which, because of our culture developments, certain sensual actions become more sexual than intercourse itself. We consider these studies would greatly benefit from a more precise definition on the forms of power, as well as an acknowledgement that just because some phenomena appear to be cross-cultural, they are not always owed to the same causes. Obviously, this answer is just a random suggest one, but we agreed that this book has some serious cultural drawbacks. And for the other question from chapter 10, we came up with a question What about the fact that most religions across human history encouraged fertility and seasonal, or even all year long mating with various partners? If, if our evolutionary traits, sexual predilections, religious models of avoiding fear are shaped in thousands of years, then monogamy only plays a minor role in the grand scheme of human psychological development. Religions in which sexual rituals were regularly held, Hellenistic cults, Druidic, Babylonian, are much more commonly spread throughout history and geography. We thank you for your attention.